It's a pleasure to be here. And I would say just in time, and we can start immediately. I'll speak today about e-commerce tracking with Pimcore and about e-commerce analytics in general. So I try to combine both. It's not for implementers, it's more for marketeers, for decision makers, and it's more of, let's say, a motivation to use e-commerce tracking and some information how we can combine it with Pimcore and how we can combine it with features like personalization in Pimcore, because I think that's of interest. First of all, who am I? I'm a long time in this web-based business since 1996. I was author, have written real books. I'm one of the founding partners of Arrabiata, managing directors, and nowadays I'm mainly responsible for the consulting area. I try to support our customers in the area of e-commerce, and because I have a diploma in business, I'm somewhat keen on numbers, I would say, and e-commerce tracking is all about numbers. So first of all, I would introduce the basic principles of e-commerce tracking. Afterwards, the implementation in Pimcore. And the last part is about tracking and personalization, how we can combine e-commerce tracking with the personalization features in Pimcore. So that are the 3 steps for today. Please just ask any questions you have. We will watch the chat and be available for all of these questions. Let's start with the basic principles of e-commerce tracking. I'll have to start with a citation of Henry Ford, well loved in the business area. Half the money I spend on advertising is waste, and the problem is I do not know which half. And my message is with e-commerce tracking, we can change that, and the world changes, so we can measure better and better how we invest money. And that's the main goal, in my opinion, of e-commerce tracking. We want to know whether the traffic we pay for goes down the funnel to a good conversion. That means we have different traffic sources, different traffic channels, for example, social media, the classical SEO, SEA, we have newsletters, etc. And we want to know which of these channels are working. Therefore, we have to measure not only the conversion itself, but also the funnel and the sources. I'll show you an example out of one of our customer projects. There we had this overview. It's an overview of Google Analytics, and it shows the number of users in a table sorted by source. There are different sources. Organic search is SEO, it's Google directly, direct traffic, then we have social traffic. And it was interesting because they had a conversion rate that it's not a great conversion rate, but for a manufacturer, it's okay. 0.71. It's not a simple online shop, so therefore the conversion rate was quite okay. But there were channels that are not working, and the main channel not working was the channel of social. So in the social channel, we had over 3,000 users, and we had an average duration that's much lower than in the other direct channels and in the advertising channels. And we had an e-commerce conversion rate that's nearly 0. And when we can see this and when we can investigate that, we have the possibilities to improve the usability of the site. In this case, we have improved the campaign message of the social media campaign, and we could raise the e-commerce conversion rate to 0.5, and not high, but not wasted money. And that's the main goal of e-commerce tracking: not to waste advertising money and not to to give the users a bad feeling, bad emotion in their customer journey on the e-commerce page itself. So therefore, that's one of the main targets of e-commerce tracking. What do we use as indicators in e-commerce tracking? Just a small overview. We use the basic indicators. That's the number of sales, the number of orders. Then we have the profit, depending on the margin we are doing. Then we have the visitors or visits. We have the basket value. That means the average basket. That's interesting for us. How much money do we get per basket or per order? Then we have the return rates in quantity and value. That depends on the business area, whether the return rate is important. In fashion business, very important. In other businesses, less important. Then we have the advertising costs, page views that are the classical analytics informations, web analytics informations, and also duration of stay, these basic informations. The basic informations, page views, duration of stay, we are getting out of the classical web analytics. For e-commerce tracking, we have to do a little bit more. Let's see another example. There we have the data, the evaluation of e-commerce orders over a period of time. And there we can see there are marketing actions, campaigns there, and they had a bigger effort behind it and also bigger effect. So here we got more orders, and we can control that over the period of time. These classical, simple, I would say KPIs, simple KPIs. The second part of the e-commerce tracking world are the more complex KPIs. We call it ratio indicators. That are, for example, sales by visitors or the well-known conversion rate. When we say conversion rate, this term is not defined completely. There are lots of conversion rates in an e-commerce funnel because every step can have an own conversion rate. When we speak about the conversion rate at all, it's meant how many visitors are converted into customers. That's the main conversion rate. That's also shown by Google Analytics or Matomo or other tracking tools. But always be careful when you speak about conversion rate. It can be a little bit complex KPI. Other ratio indicators are the bounce rate. How many users do we lose when they are coming onto the site and they are only visiting one site? That would be the classical bounce rate. The repurchase rate. How many users are coming back and buying many or different times. And certainly also ratio indicators for marketing costs, like, for example, return on investment or ACOS, as to name some of them. So what we want to try to get is with e-commerce tracking the simple indicators and also the ratio indicators. That's the main job behind it. And at all, we want to find out whether there are changes over the time. Some of these changes are good. We can raise the conversion rate, for example, and some of these are bad. In this case, it's very bad. It's a well-known example of e-commerce tracking. It's out of the demo store of Google. It was a time in November 2018. Google lost almost 90% of their conversion rate. What happened then? So first of all, in e-commerce tracking cannot tell you what happened. You always have to combine it with the informations you have in background about your system, about your shop system, and then you can combine that with the informations out of the tracking and find out what was the problem. In this case, it was the problem. Google changed a little bit the checkout process and quit using PayPal. So they haven't implemented PayPal anymore in this November 2018. And you can see that also on this screen. It's the out of the same Google example account, very interesting account. You can get access to this account with any Google Analytics account, because Google offers parts of this merchandising store as an e-commerce implementation example. And here you can also see, out of the cart, only 22% of the users got to the next step. And in the payment, it's even worse. Only 13% of all of the users switched to the next step. Before, it was 90% of the users. So they lost almost 80% of their users with switching off PayPal. So now we know it's important to do e-commerce tracking, and we know which numbers we want to have. Next question is how to implement in Pimcore. We have taken Google Analytics as an example. It's not that I'm a big Google Analytics fan or something like that. Certainly, it's a mighty tool. You can also implement eTracker, Econda, any other tools, Matomo, in a similar way. And all of these tools also have e-commerce tracking. The principles are nearly the same. I've just taken Google Analytics as an example because it's the most used tool out there. That's the only reason why I took Google Analytics. In Pimcore, we have three options to integrate Google Analytics code in general. We can embed the code manually in the header of the website. We can use the Google Tag Manager to implement Google Analytics code. That's the way I would recommend we use most of the time, because you afterwards have lots more control about implementation, and it's also very helpful for e-commerce implementation. I will speak about that shortly. And the third option is embedding it via the marketing settings in Pimcore. That in the background also implements analytics code in the template or the tag manager. So it's out of a technical perspective, it remains the same. Implementation of the analytics code in general is none of an effort. It's done in minutes. A little bit more complex is the implementation of the e-commerce tracking, because Google Analytics has own JavaScript libraries for the e-commerce tracking itself. So you need own e-commerce tracking code there. And to implement it, you can also use two ways. You can do it via code in the template, or you can do it via Tag Manager. The Tag Manager version is a little bit simpler. Google offers lots of documentation there. For example, for Matomo, the way to go would be very similar. There's a standard code to integrate. Matomo also offers a Tag Manager, and you can, as an additional package, implement e-commerce tracking. Because the e-commerce tracking in your Google account needs some more informations about the funnel and about the purchase process. So you have to give the Google the informations about what's the target page where you have your completed order there, and so-called the thank you page at the end of the process. That's part of the implementation. We have to speak about the Pimcore's integrated tracking. Probably some of you know already that in Pimcore version 6, there was an implementation of analytics directly in the backend of Pimcore that was done by Matomo. This implementation actually is not part of Pimcore X. So that means this native integration was removed. What we have there, and that can be very helpful in some circumstances, is the Pimcore Tracking Manager. This tracking manager allows you to integrate code on a code basis, own tracking events, for example. And I have one example where we have used that to integrate the Pimcore part with personalization directly with the Google Analytics e-commerce tracking. Let's have a look. First, we used the standard segmentation. Probably all of you know this demo part of Pimcore. There you can see the case with the cars and the luxury cars there. And there we have used one of these segmentations, profiling users as luxury car. And we have implemented one JavaScript call to the e-commerce tracking of Google Analytics, where we gave Google Analytics the information that the user is part of this segment, that the user has a, let's call it an event or variable, their luxury cars. Certainly we can define different rules here then we have to do a little bit of implementation effort to integrate it and to have a JavaScript call that calls directly the e-commerce API of Google. That was the first step. On second step, we went into the Google e-commerce account or the Google Analytics account. We went to the conditions, and there we used the event label that was sent via the commerce tracking, and filtered it for the name luxury cars here. And in the next step, we had access in the segmentation of the analytics overview. We had access to this segment, luxury car users, and we were able to select them. And afterwards, we have this result. So we were able to compare all users with luxury cars users. Okay, there was one typo there. That's my fault. And we could compare the e-commerce conversion rates of different segmentations of the users. So we had here the comparison between all users and the part of the luxury cars users. That was this personalization result. Certainly that's only an example and only done in a demo, but actually we are working on customer solutions with that personalization. So afterwards we can track the funnel via user segmentation and can combine it also with source segmentation. So for example, we can say users via social media that are interested in luxury cars by rules that are set in the Pimcore universe can be tracked and measured directly in Google Analytics, for example. So that's mainly this, in my opinion, very interesting case. And that's the end of my talk. My last slide just contains a little bit of advertising. We will have a little bit longer talk about e-commerce tracking and analytics in German. It will be 1 hour on the 8th of December. There we will go a little bit deeper in e-commerce tracking, not only about Pimcore, but we will also speak about Pimcore cases there.